On a day filled with cheers, 8-year-old Alara was the star of her school. She walked on stage again and again, her small arms overflowing with awards for perfect A-plus grades. But while other children were showered with gifts and praise, Alara had no one. Her seat in the parents' section was empty. Her eyes, however, weren't on the new bikes or toys. They were fixed on one man, Julian Thorne, the school's 32-year-old billionaire benefactor. And then she did something that silenced the entire courtyard. She walked up to him, looked him in the eye, and asked a question so profound it was about to shatter his carefully constructed world. What happens when unstoppable intelligence meets unbreakable power? The answer will change everything. Don't miss out on the incredible story that unfolds. Click that subscribe button and turn on notifications to be the first to see what happens next. The sun hung high over Northwood Elementary, a relentless orb that turned the school's asphalt playground into a shimmering black sea. Laughter and applause rippled through the air like waves, carried on the warm breeze that rustled the faded banners strung between the chain-link fences. Parents clustered in folding chairs, their faces flushed with pride, cameras flashing like distant stars. The scent of fresh-cut grass mingled with the sticky sweetness of spilled juice boxes, and somewhere in the distance a child's excited squeal pierced the hum of conversations. Ilara Vance sat at the edge of the last row, her small frame swallowed by the oversized plastic seat. At 8 years old, she was a quiet storm, eyes sharp as polished obsidian, absorbing everything while revealing nothing. Her uniform, a hand-me-down blouse and skirt, bore the faint ghosts of men's along the hems, threads pulled tight by her mother's late-night stitches. It was clean, pressed with care, but the fabric whispered of wear, of cycles and a laundromat that hummed like a tired lullaby. No one sat beside her. The empty chairs on either side felt like silent accusations, gaps where cheers should have been. The principal's voice boomed through the microphone, crackling slightly at the edges. And now for outstanding academic achievement in mathematics, science, and literature, Ilara Vance. Her name echoed, and Alara rose, clutching the hem of her skirt to steady herself. The walk to the stage felt eternal, each step on the sun-baked pavement sending a jolt up her legs. She climbed the wooden steps, the creak under her sneakers barely audible over the polite clapping. The principal, a kindly woman with wire-rimmed glasses, handed her the first certificate, a crisp sheet of paper emblazoned with gold foil, A+ excellence in mathematics. Ilara's fingers curled around it, feeling the slight embossing of the seal, warm from the principal's grip. She murmured a soft, "Thank you," her voice lost in the applause, and descended. But before she could settle back into anonymity, her name rang out again. And again. Science, another certificate. This one for a project on solar systems she'd built from scavenged cardboard and foil. Literature, for essays that wove words like intricate webs, exploring worlds far beyond her own cramped apartment. By the third time, her arms cradled a stack, the papers rustling against each other like dry leaves in the wind. Around her, the celebrations unfolded in vivid contrast. Tommy from her class, who had scraped a B in spelling, bounded off the stage into his father's arms, where a shiny new bicycle waited, its chrome gleaming under the sun. "For my champ," the man boomed, ruffling the boy's hair. Sarah, with her participation ribbon for art, unwrapped a handheld game console from her mother's purse, the electronic beeps joining the chorus of joy. Hugs enveloped them, laughter bubbled up, and the air thickened with the scent of fresh-baked cookies pulled from picnic baskets. Ilara watched it all from her solitary perch, the certificates heavy in her lap. No envy twisted in her chest, only a quiet bewilderment, a fog that settled over her thoughts like morning mist on the river she crossed each day to school. What were these papers worth, really? She'd stayed up nights under the dim glow of a single bulb, her pencil scratching equations that danced in her mind like fireflies. She'd devoured library books until her eyes burned, crafting stories that made her forget the growl of an empty stomach. All for these A+s, these symbols of perfection. Yet here they sat, inert, invisible to the world that rewarded lesser efforts with tangible treasures. If hard work vanished into thin air, what was the point of reaching for the stars? Her gaze drifted to the front row, where the dignitaries sat under a shaded canopy. Among them was Julian Thorne, the school's benefactor, a man whose name adorned the new computer lab, whispered in halls like a legend. At 32, he cut a figure of calculated precision, tailored suit hugging his lean frame, dark hair cropped short, eyes hidden behind subtle glasses that reflected the sunlight like shields. He applauded mechanically, his expression a mask of detached interest, as if the ceremony were a spreadsheet to be analyzed rather than felt. Julian's world was one of algorithms and acquisitions, where emotions were variables to be minimized. He attended these events out of obligation, his mind already drifting to the next board meeting, the next breakthrough in neural networks. As the ceremony wound down, the crowd dispersed in a flurry of hugs and photos. Ilara lingered, the stack of certificates clutched to her chest like a shield. Her heart pounded, a rhythmic drum urging her forward. She wove through the thinning throng, the grass crunching softly under her feet, until she stood before Julian. He was taller up close, his cologne a faint hint of citrus cutting through the summer heat. "Excuse me, Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her knees. She tilted her head back, meeting his gaze with unblinking clarity. "May I ask you a question? How do I turn these papers into something real?" Julian paused, his phone halfway to his ear. For the first time that afternoon, a flicker crossed his face. Not annoyance, but intrigue. The girl's words hung in the air, simple yet profound, slicing through the noise like a well-coded query. He lowered his hand, studying her. The worn uniform, the earnest eyes, the certificates that spoke of untapped potential. A faint smile tugged at his lips, the kind that signaled a puzzle worth solving. Ilara turned away then, her question lingering like an echo. The walk home blurred in the heat, the certificates tucked under her arm, their edges curling slightly in the humidity. As she crossed the cracked sidewalk toward the apartment building that loomed like a weary sentinel, she replayed the moment in her mind. Something had shifted, a spark in the void. For the first time, her invisible efforts felt seen, if only for a heartbeat. Julian Thorne stood amid the dispersing crowd, the girl's words echoing in his mind like an unresolved equation. "How do I turn these papers into something real?" It wasn't the plea of a child begging for handouts. It was a query that pierced the veil of his carefully constructed world. He watched her small figure recede into the distance, the stack of certificates clutched like a talisman against the afternoon's haze. For a man who built empires on code and capital, where every investment yielded predictable returns, this was an anomaly, a variable that demanded exploration. The drive back to Thorne Industries blurred in a haze of traffic horns and the metallic tang of exhaust. Julian's fingers drummed on the leather steering wheel, his thoughts fracturing like light through a prism. Real. What did that mean to her? To him, reality was lines of code manifesting as apps that billions swiped through daily, fortunes amassed in digital vaults. But her eyes, clear, unyielding, had held a hunger not for wealth, but for transformation. He pulled into the underground garage, the cool air-conditioned blast hitting him like a reset. By the time he reached his penthouse office, overlooking the city's steel spines glinting in the sun, a decision had crystallized. He would seek her out, not with charity which he dispensed through faceless foundations, but with an invitation into his domain. A test, perhaps, to see if that spark was mere illusion or something worth nurturing. Julian Thorne did not believe in altruism without calculation. Every act was an investment, and this girl, Ilara, might just yield dividends beyond measure. The next day dawned with the sharp buzz of his alarm, pulling him from a sleep haunted by fragmented dreams of algorithms unraveling like threads. He dressed in his armor, a crisp shirt, tailored slacks, and dispatched his assistant, Marcus, with a terse email. Locate the mother of Ilara Vance from Northwood Elementary. Schedule a meeting poster shift today. Efficiency was his creed. Details fell into place like dominoes. Lena Vance wiped the sweat from her brow at the back of her wrist, the diner's fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like angry bees. The air was thick with the sizzle of grease on the griddle and the sharp bite of coffee brewing endlessly. Her shift at the greasy spoon had dragged on, plates clattering in her hands, tips meager in her apron pocket. At 35, Lena carried the weight of survival on shoulders, knotted from years of scrubbing floors and waiting tables. Her hands, calloused and raw, bore the scars of a life pieced together from scraps. Rent paid late, meals stretched thin, all for the bright-eyed girl who waited at home with dreams too big for their cramped world. As the clock ticked past closing, she untied her apron, folding it with the precision of someone who knew every crease mattered. The bell above the door jingled, and in walked a man who didn't belong, tall, impeccably dressed, his presence slicing through the lingering haze of fried onions. Julian Thorne scanned the empty booths, his gaze landing on her like a spotlight. "Mrs. Vance." His voice was smooth, measured, carrying the undertone of boardrooms and billion-dollar deals. "It's Ms." Lena corrected, her tone edged with wariness. She straightened, wiping her hands on her jeans, the faint scent of dish soap clinging to her skin. "And who might you be?" "Julian Thorne." He extended a hand, but she didn't take it, crossing her arms instead, a barrier forged from pride and suspicion. "I met your daughter yesterday at the awards ceremony. Elara." Lena's eyes narrowed, a flicker of protectiveness igniting like a spark on dry tinder. Elara had mentioned the encounter in hushed excitement over their modest dinner of canned soup and crackers. How she'd asked the rich man a question, how he'd actually listened. But now, face to face with him, Lena felt the gulf between their worlds yawn wide. "What about her? If you're here to offer some pity prize, we're not interested." Julian paused, absorbing her defensiveness like data points in an analysis. He had anticipated resistance. Pride was a variable he'd encountered in negotiations, often more stubborn than greed. But beneath her guarded stance, he sensed the exhaustion, the faint lines around her eyes, the way her shoulders slumped just a fraction when she thought no one was looking. "No prizes," he said, his voice lowering to match the quiet hum of the empty diner. "Elara asked me a profound question yesterday about turning achievements into something tangible. I believe I have an answer, but it's not one I can give in words alone." Lena's heart stuttered. Profound. That was her Elara, always probing deeper, her mind a whirlwind in a child's body. But trust didn't come easy. Too many helpers had strings attached, turning kindness into chains. "And what exactly do you propose, Mr. Thorne? We're doing just fine on our own." He leaned against a booth, the vinyl creaking under his weight, and met her gaze without flinching. "A visit to my company this Friday, Thorne Industries. It's where ideas like those on her certificates become reality. Prototypes, innovations that change lives. It's educational, nothing more. No obligations, no charity. Just a chance for her to see the bridge between potential and practice." The words hung in the air, laced with the faint clink of cutlery from the kitchen as the cook wrapped up. Lena's mind raced. The extra shift she'd have to cover, the bus fare, the fear of exposing their threadbare life to this polished stranger. But then she thought of Elara's face last night, lit by the single lamp in their tiny living room, poring over those certificates with a mix of pride and quiet disappointment. What if this was the spark her daughter needed? The one Lena, with her aching back and endless hours, couldn't provide. "Fine," she said finally, her voice steady but laced with caution. "But only if it doesn't interfere with her schoolwork, and we'll make our own way there." Julian nodded, a subtle shift in his posture, the first crack in his composed facade, a hint of satisfaction warming his chest. This wasn't just about the girl anymore. It was a challenge to his own detachment, a pull toward something human in the midst of his mechanical empire. "Excellent. I'll have my assistant send the details. Thank you, Ms. Vance." As he left, the bell jingling in his wake, Lena exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The diner felt emptier, the fluorescent hum louder. She gathered her things, the weight of the day pressing down, but beneath it, a fragile hope stirred, like the first raindrop on parched earth. Back at home, the apartment greeted her with its familiar confines. Walls paper thin, the faint musty scent of damp corners, a kitchen table scarred from years of use. Elara sat there, legs swinging under the chair, a library book splayed open. Something on quantum physics, far beyond her grade. "Mom, how was work?" Lena forced a smile, dropping her bag with a thud. "Tiring as always, but guess what? We're going on a little adventure this Friday." Ilara's eyes widened, the book forgotten. "Adventure? Where?" "To see Mr. Thorne's company. He thinks you might like it." The girl's face lit up, a rare burst of unfiltered joy that tugged at Lena's heartstrings. As Ilara chattered about what she might see, robots maybe, or flying machines, Lena watched, a knot of anxiety twisting in her gut. Hope was a double-edged blade. It could lift them up or cut them deep. But for her daughter's sake, she'd wield it carefully. That night, as Ilara drifted to sleep clutching her certificates like a dream catcher, Julian sat in his office, the city lights sprawling below like a circuit board. He replayed the conversation with Lena, her fierce pride mirroring something long buried in him. A reminder that not all investments were financial. For the first time in years, anticipation thrummed in his veins, not for a deal, but for the unknown spark in a child's eyes. The equation was evolving, and he was no longer just an observer. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing the gleaming lobby of Thorne Industries, a cathedral of glass and steel that pierced the skyline like a digital monolith. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting prismatic patterns on the polished marble floors, where the faint echo of footsteps mingled with the low hum of servers hidden behind sleek walls. Ilara stepped out first, her sneakers squeaking faintly against the surface, eyes wide not with awe at the opulence, but with a hunger for the secrets it held. Lena followed, her hand hovering protectively near her daughter's shoulder, the air conditioning raising goosebumps on her arms despite the warmth outside. The scent of fresh coffee wafted from a nearby atrium cafe, undercut by the sterile tang of electronics, circuits and solder, innovation distilled into ozone. Julian waited at the reception desk, his posture relaxed yet commanding, a tablet in hand like an extension of his arm. He had spent the morning reviewing reports, his mind dissecting market trends with surgical precision. But now as he spotted them, a subtle shift occurred, a quickening in his pulse, an unbidden curiosity that felt almost foreign. "Ms. Vance, Ilara," he greeted, his voice carrying the crisp edge of efficiency. "Welcome. Shall we begin?" Ilara nodded eagerly, her backpack slung over one shoulder, containing nothing but a notebook and those certificates, now slightly creased from constant handling. Lena managed a tight smile, her work boots feeling out of place amid the suited professionals bustling past. She had taken the afternoon off, a rare concession that gnawed at her. Lost wages meant tighter belts next week. But Ilara's excitement had been infectious. Her questions about what makes computers think spilling out during the bus ride here. They started in the atrium, where holographic displays flickered to life at Julian's gesture, projecting swirling data streams that danced like fireflies in the air. "This is where ideas are born," he explained, his tone measured, as if lecturing a boardroom rather than a child. "Not on paper, but in prototypes. We take concepts, like the ones in your awards, and test them until they work in the real world." Ilara leaned forward, her fingers itching to touch the holograms, the cool blue light reflecting in her eyes. "But how do you know if an idea is good? Like in math, there are proofs. But here—" Julian paused, intrigued by the directness. He tapped his tablet, summoning a 3D model of a neural network, nodes pulsing like a living brain. "We simulate, run algorithms through thousands of scenarios. Failure isn't the end. It's data." His words flowed easily, but inside a faint unease stirred. This was the first time in years he'd explained his work without jargon, stripping it bare for unfiltered scrutiny. As they moved to the labs, the air grew thicker with the whir of fans and the sharp beep of diagnostics. Engineers in white coats hunched over benches, cluttered with circuit boards and screens displaying lines of code scrolling like digital rivers. One room housed a prototype drone, its rotors whispering as it hovered inches above a table, sensors glinting under LED lights. Ilara's questions came rapid fire. Why use quadcopters instead of HEX? Wouldn't more blades mean better stability and wind? The lead engineer, a burly man named Raj with grease-streaked hands, blinked, then chuckled. Kid's got a point. We've tested hex configs, but power drain's an issue. Here, see for yourself. He handed her a tablet linked to the simulation software, and Alara's fingers flew across the screen, adjusting variables with an intuition that bordered on instinct. The drone's virtual model stabilized in a gusty scenario, metrics improving by 12%. Raj's eyes widened, the scent of solder lingering as he leaned in. How'd you figure that torque adjustment so fast? From a book on physics, Alara said simply, though her cheeks flushed with quiet pride. And it just made sense. Lena watched from the doorway, her heart swelling even as doubt gnawed at her edges. The lab's fluorescent glow highlighted the contrast, her daughter's animated face against the backdrop of this alien world, where ideas weren't dreams but blueprints etched in silicon. But each marvel twisted the knife. How could she provide this at home, with their flickering bulb and secondhand books? Julian observed it all, his detachment cracking like thin ice. He'd expected a wide-eyed tourist. Instead, Alara dissected concepts with a precision that mirrored his own youth, hungry, relentless. In the nanotechnology wing, amid the sterile hush of clean rooms visible through observation windows, she pointed to a display of carbon nanotubes. These could filter water, right? Like trap pollutants at the molecular level? But what about scalability? How do you make enough without costing too much? The question hung, and the researcher, a woman with sharp features and a ponytail, froze mid-explanation. That's exactly what we're tackling. Care to brainstorm? Alara dove in, sketching a rough diagram on a digital whiteboard, her small hand tracing lines that suggested hybrid materials. Julian felt a pull in his chest, not pity, but recognition. This wasn't a child playing pretend. It was raw potential, stifled by circumstance. For a man who viewed people as assets or liabilities, Alara was emerging as an outlier, an investment whose returns could redefine equations. By the tour's end, in a conference room overlooking the city, they sat with refreshments, fresh fruit platters and sparkling water that fizzed against Lena's tongue like luxury she couldn't afford. Alara bubbled with ideas, her notebook filled with scribbles, diagrams of improved algorithms, notes on nano applications. Mr. Thorne, could this really happen? Turning my science project into something like your drones? Julian leaned back, the leather chair creaking softly. It could, but it takes more than ideas. Resources, testing, iteration. His mind raced ahead, calculating risks. How to nurture this without overstepping. Altruism wasn't his forte, yet here in the quiet thrill of her intellect, he glimpsed a mirror to his own isolated genius. A vulnerability stirred, memories of his own childhood, buried in code to escape a cold home, now resurfacing unbidden. Lena cleared her throat, breaking the spell. This has been eye-opening, but we should head home. Thank you, Mr. Thorne. Her voice held gratitude laced with finality, the bus schedule ticking in her mind like a metronome of reality. As they left, the elevator descending with a gentle whoosh, Julian watched them through the glass doors. Alara waved, her face alight. But Lena's expression was guarded, a fortress against the unknown. Alone in the atrium, the holograms flickering idly, Julian felt the shift deepen. This wasn't mere curiosity anymore. It was a compulsion to bridge the gap, to transform her papers into prototypes. But how without shattering the fragile trust he'd glimpsed? He returned to his office, the city lights beginning to twinkle as dusk fell, and for the first time, his calculations included intangibles. Hope, perhaps, or the quiet revolution of one brilliant mind awakening another. The glass facade of Thorne Industries reflected the fading twilight like a mirror to Julian's evolving thoughts. The city below pulsing with life he rarely paused to notice. He had dismissed Marcus with a nod after reviewing the day's logs, but the tour lingered in his mind. A montage of Alara's incisive questions, her small hands gesturing at screens as if conducting an orchestra of ideas. It wasn't just her intellect that unsettled him. It was the mirror she held up to his own isolation. At her age, he'd buried himself in code to escape a home where affection was as scarce as downtime. Now watching her navigate his world with unbridled curiosity, A crack formed in his armored detachment, a whisper of what if. He tapped his desk, summoning files on Northwood Elementary's records. Ilara's transcripts glowed on the screen, perfect scores across the board, teacher notes praising her as a prodigy in waiting. But the address listed, a rundown block on the city's fringes, jarred against the data. Curiosity morphed into resolve. He fired off a message to Marcus. Background on Vance family. Discreet. Full report by morning. Investments demanded due diligence after all. As the office lights dimmed automatically, Julian leaned back, the leather chair sighing under him. For the first time, his calculations factored in something intangible. Potential squandered. A variable he couldn't ignore. Morning arrived with the sharp ping of his inbox, the city's fog pressing against the windows like a veil. Marcus's report was thorough, as always. Pages of financials, employment history, medical records pieced from public sources. Lena Vance. Single mother juggling 3 jobs. Diner waitress, office cleaner, weekend cashier. Rent arrears are mounting, and an eviction notice dated 2 weeks prior is tucked into court filings. No savings, credit stretched thin. And the medical notes, chronic back pain from years of manual labor, untreated beyond over-the-counter pills, flares noted in ER visits she'd skip follow-ups on. The apartment, a 1-bedroom in a building plagued by leaks and flickering power. The air likely thick with mildew and the distant rumble of traffic. Julian's coffee grew cold as he scrolled, the bitterness on his tongue mirroring the knot in his stomach. This wasn't poverty and abstract statistics. It was a cycle, vicious and self-perpetuating. Lena's endless shifts left no room for upskilling, no time to chase better opportunities. Ilara's brilliance? Confined to a dim corner desk? Library books her only portal? No computer to code on? No lab to experiment in? Those A+ were flares in the dark, signals of genius flickering unseen, doomed to fade without fuel. He felt a rare surge of anger, not at Lena, but at the system, an algorithm rigged against the under-resourced, where effort yielded diminishing returns. By midday, the decision solidified. He wouldn't overwhelm them with largesse. That would shatter Lena's pride, a fortress he glimpsed in her wary eyes. No, subtlety was key. Frame it as an opportunity, not a handout. He dialed a contact at a subsidiary firm, a logistics company needing administrative support. Flexible hours, entry level with training, health benefits from day one. The pieces aligned like code compiling cleanly. That afternoon, he arranged the meeting at a neutral cafe near Lena's diner, a quiet spot with wooden tables scarred from years of use, the air rich with the aroma of fresh-baked scones and steaming tea. Lena arrived flushed from her shift, her uniform swapped for a simple blouse, the faint scent of grease still clinging like a shadow. She slid into the booth opposite him, her posture rigid, eyes scanning for exits out of habit. "Mr. Thorne," she began, voice laced with caution, "if this is about another tour—" "It's not." Julian set his cup down, the porcelain clinking softly. He met her gaze, stripping his tone of corporate polish. "I've been thinking about Ilara's question, turning paper into reality. But ideas need soil to grow, resources, stability." Lena's fingers tightened around her mug, steam curling up like unspoken defenses. "We're managing. Always have." "I know." He slid a folder across the table. Not flashy, just printed emails and a job description. "This isn't charity. One of my companies has a pilot program. Welfare for potential employees. Administrative role, part-time to start, with training in data entry, skills that build. Covers health checkups, too. No strings, you earn it." She opened the folder, her eyes scanning the details. Hours that fit around Ilara's school, a salary that would cover rent with breathing room, insurance that could finally address the fire in her back that woke her at night. The cafe's murmur faded, the clatter of spoons, the hiss of the espresso machine, as hope warred with suspicion in her chest. Why us? Why Ilara? Julian hesitated, the truth bubbling up unfiltered. Because she's exceptional, and exceptions get buried in systems like this. I've seen it, lived it in a way. This is an investment in potential, Ms. Vance. Nothing more. Lena traced the job title with her finger, the paper smooth under her calloused skin. Pride screamed to refuse, to prove she could claw through alone. But then she pictured Ilara's face last night, sketching drone designs on scrap paper under their flickering kitchen light. What mother denied her child wings? "I'll think about it," she said finally, though her voice softened, the folder tucked into her bag like a fragile promise. She accepted 2 days later, a brief call laced with reluctant gratitude. The transition was swift. Lena's first day at the subsidiary brought the crisp scent of office air, keyboards clacking in rhythm, and a desk with her nameplate. The back pain? A doctor's visit was scheduled, and meds were prescribed that dulled the ache to a whisper. Finances eased. The eviction notice withdrawn. Groceries no longer rationed. Ilara noticed the changes in ripples. Her mother's steps were lighter. A new stack of science books appeared on the table. From the library program, Julian kept distance, updates via email, subtle nudges like access to online coding tutorials. But in quiet moments, Ilara tinkered, her mind alight with possibilities. One evening, as rain pattered against their window, she emailed Julian a simple query. "How do nanofilters work in water? Could they help places like my neighborhood?" His reply came swiftly, with detailed diagrams attached. But inside, Julian felt the pull deepen. This wasn't just aid. It was synergy, her questions sharpening his own innovations. Yet doubt crept in. Was he meddling, projecting his past onto her present? The report on his desk, now annotated with progress notes, felt like a ledger of good intentions. As he powered down his computer, the city lights blurring in the rain-streaked glass, Julian realized the equation had inverted. He wasn't just changing their world. They were reshaping his. Weeks blended into a tentative rhythm. Lena's confidence grew with each spreadsheet mastered, her back straighter, smiles more frequent over dinner. Ilara dove into the tutorials, her notebook filling with code snippets and sketches, a water filtration concept budding from their exchanges. One night, as Lena tucked her in, the apartment's walls seeming less confining, Ilara whispered, "Mom, things feel possible now." Lena kissed her forehead, the scent of fresh laundry soft in the air. "They always were, sweetheart. We just needed a little light." Julian, miles away in his echoing penthouse, reviewed her latest email, a faint smile breaking his solitude. The silent struggle was easing, but he sensed the horizon, storms of scrutiny brewing, unseen. For now, though, the investment yielded quiet returns, a family's flicker turning to flame. The whispers started subtly, like the first drops of rain on a window pane, unnoticed at first, then insistent, streaking the glass with doubt. Julian Thorne felt them before he heard them, a shift in the air during board meetings, eyes darting away when he entered rooms. It was a Tuesday morning. The conference table at Thorne Industries, polished to a mirror sheen, reflecting the stern faces of the board members under the harsh LED lights. The scent of fresh espresso hung heavy, mingling with the faint ozone from the projector humming to life. Julian sat at the head, his fingers steepled, reviewing quarterly projections that soared like his ambitions. But today the numbers blurred as Evelyn Hart, the eldest board member, a woman in her 60s with silver hair pinned like a crown and a gaze sharp as fractured ice, cleared her throat. "Julian," she began, her voice laced with the patrician drawl of old money, "we've been hearing concerns about your recent involvements." He lifted his gaze, the room's chill seeping into his skin despite the controlled climate. Concerns? The word echoed in his mind, a variable out of place. He'd always prided himself on control, emotions compartmentalized, decisions data-driven. But Evelyn's expression, a mask of feigned sympathy, stirred an unfamiliar unease. "It's this girl," she pressed, sliding a tablet across the table. On it, an internal memo circulated anonymously. Whispers of favoritism, resources diverted to personal projects. A child from the wrong side of town, people talk, single man in his 30s, pouring time and money into her family. Optics, Julian. They matter. The room fell silent, the tick of the wall clock amplifying like a heartbeat. Julian's pulse quickened, not with anger, at first, but with a cold calculation. Optics. He'd anticipated scrutiny in business deals, but this, it twisted his intentions into something sordid, a narrative scripted by suspicion. He thought of Alara's latest email, her sketch of a nanofilter prototype sent last night, her words bubbling with excitement. What if we added a solar charger for places without power? Pure ingenuity, untainted. Yet here in this sterile boardroom, it was reduced to liability. I assure you, he said evenly, though his jaw tightened, it's an investment in talent, nothing more. But inside, doubt seeded, a mirror to his own buried vulnerabilities. Was he overstepping, projecting his isolated youth onto her? The boy who'd coded through nights to escape a loveless home now saw echoes in Alara's hunger. Helping her felt like redemption, but Evelyn's words poisoned it, turning compassion into question. The meeting dragged on, projections approved with nods, but the undercurrent lingered like the bitter aftertaste of overbrewed coffee. By afternoon, the whispers escalated. A local tabloid article pinged in his alerts, its headline glaring on his screen. Tech tycoon's secret protege, philanthropy or something more. The piece was thin on facts, thick on innuendo. Anonymous sources claiming unusual interest in a poor family's child. Photos of him at the school ceremony, blurred but suggestive. Julian's office, with its panoramic views now shrouded in gathering clouds, felt confining. He paced, the carpet muffling his steps. The distant honk of traffic below, a mocking reminder of the world's gaze. Reporters called by evening, their voices oily through the phone. Mr. Thorne, care to comment on the allegations? Allegations. The word sliced deep, evoking not logic but a raw, unfamiliar ache. He'd built his empire on transparency. Code open-sourced when strategic, deals dissected in public filings. But this, it defied equations. No algorithm could quantify intent. No data scrub away the slime of suspicion. He issued a statement through PR. Thorne Industries supports educational initiatives for promising youth. All actions are above board. Curt, factual. Yet as he hit send, a hollowness settled in his chest, the first crack in his facade, a vulnerability he'd long suppressed. Lena learned of it over breakfast. The apartment's kitchen bathed in weak morning light, filtering through grimy windows. The radio hummed in the background, a local news segment crackling. Questions raised about billionaire Julian Thorne's involvement with a local family. Her spoon clattered into the cereal bowl, milk splashing onto the scarred table. Alara, munching toast with her nose in a borrowed physics book, looked up. Mom, what's wrong? Lena's hands trembled as she grabbed her phone, searching for the article. The words blurred. Special attention to an 8-year-old girl. Motives unclear. Shame burned hot in her throat, a fire stoked by years of scraping by, of refusing handouts to preserve dignity. She'd accepted the job, the subtle aids because they felt earned, steps toward self-sufficiency. But this, it painted her as a beggar, Alara as a pawn in some twisted game. The apartment's walls closed in, the faint drip from the faucet echoing her rising panic. By midday at her new desk, surrounded by the click of keyboards and the murmur of colleagues, whispers reached her too. A coworker leaned over. Hey, is that you in the news? With that rich guy? Lena's face flushed, the fluorescent lights overhead buzzing like accusations. She excused herself to the bathroom, splashing cold water on her face, the mirror reflecting eyes hollow with humiliation. Pride, her armor, cracked under the weight. How could she let this taint Alara, the girl who deserved stars, not scandal? She called Julian that afternoon, her voice steady but edged with steel, the office hum fading as she stepped outside into the biting wind. We need to talk, now. They met at the same cafe, the scones' warmth contrasting the chill settling between them. Lena arrived first, her coat wrapped tight, the folder from their last meeting clutched like a weapon. Julian entered, the bells jingle jarring, his expression composed but eyes betraying a flicker of strain, the first she'd seen. "Ms. Vance, stop!" She slid the article printout across the table, the paper crinkling under her fingers. "This ends today. The job, the emails, all of it. I won't have my daughter dragged through mud because of your help." Julian's breath caught, the cafe's chatter a distant roar. He'd prepared defenses, logic, reassurances, but her pain hit like unhandled exceptions, crashing his system. "Lena, this is baseless. Tabloid trash. I'll handle it." "Handle it?" Her laugh was bitter, cutting through the steam from her untouched tea. "You think money fixes everything? People are talking. About you. About us. Ilara doesn't need this shadow." He leaned forward, the wooden table creaking, vulnerability surfacing unbidden. "I never intended." "She's brilliant. This world chews up talent like hers. I saw myself in her. The isolation, the drive. Helping felt right." Lena's eyes softened fractionally, but resolve hardened her voice. "Right for you, maybe. But for us, it's poison. Thank you, truly. But we're done." She left, the bells chime final as a door slamming. Julian sat alone, the scones cooling, the article staring back like an accusation. Inside, turmoil churned, not just for the severed tie, but for the mirror it held. His detachment exposed as arrogance, good intentions warped by privilege. For the first time, logic failed him. Emotion, raw and unfiltered, demanded reckoning. Ilara overheard it all that evening, hidden behind her bedroom door, the apartment's thin walls betraying every word. Her heart hammered, a storm in her chest as Lena recounted the call over dinner. Julian, her guide, the one who saw beyond papers to possibilities, gone? The room spun, the scent of boiled pasta turning nauseous. That night, as Lena slept fitfully, Ilara crept to the table, her notebook open under the dim lamp. Fingers trembling, she sketched furiously. A water filter model, enhanced with solar elements and nanomesh. Equations flowing like tears unshed. If she could prove her worth, show she wasn't a burden, but a partner, she might salvage this. Sleep evaded her, the city's distant sirens wailing like her unspoken fears. Losing him meant losing the bridge to real, a void deeper than hunger. In the quiet hours, determination ignited, a child's resolve fierce and unyielding. Lena's departure left the cafe feeling hollow, the bells chime echoing in Julian's ears like a final verdict. He sat there longer than intended, the tea cooling to a tepid sludge, the article's printout crumpling under his fist. For a man accustomed to bending markets to his will, this rejection stung, not as a business loss, but as a personal fracture. Lena's words replayed, poison, shadow. He'd seen the hurt in her eyes, the way her shoulders hunched as if carrying an invisible weight, and it mirrored something deep within him, a long-suppressed echo of his own youth, when kindness from strangers had come laced with pity, eroding his self-reliance. Was that what he'd become? A benefactor whose help tainted rather than uplifted? The drive home blurred in the evening traffic, headlights streaking like accusations through the rain-slicked windshield. His penthouse greeted him with sterile silence. The hum of the smart fridge, the faint glow of screens awaiting commands. Julian poured a scotch, the amber liquid burning a path down his throat, but it did little to dull the churn in his mind. Logic dictated he step back, cut ties, issue a denial, let the rumors fade like outdated code. Yet Ilara's emails haunted him, her last one, sent just yesterday, brimming with questions about scalability and filtration tech. To abandon that spark now felt like deletion, erasure of potential he'd only begun to map. Sleep came fitfully, dreams fragmented, lines of code unraveling into a child's handwriting, boardrooms dissolving into dingy apartments. He woke to his alarm's insistent beep, the city fogged in pre-dawn gray, and checked his inbox on instinct. There it was, an email from an unfamiliar address, subject my project, please look. Attached, scans of notebook pages, diagrams meticulously drawn in pencil. equations flowing with a precision that belied her age. Ilara's message was brief, her words tumbling out like a plea. Mr. Thorne, I heard Mom talking. I don't want to stop. This is what I made from what you showed me. A filter for dirty water. It uses nano stuff and solar power, so it's cheap. Please say it's good enough. I can do more. Julian's breath caught, the screen's glow illuminating his face in the dim room. The schematics were rudimentary, childlike sketches of tubes and panels, but the underlying logic shone. Photovoltaic cells integrated with carbon nanotubes for passive filtration, efficiency curves calculated with surprising accuracy. She'd even noted cost estimates, scavenged from online sources, aiming for under $10 per unit in bulk. It wasn't polished, but the ingenuity pierced him. A raw algorithm, unoptimized yet promising. This wasn't a child's doodle, it was proof, her way of fighting back against the severance. He replied before doubt could intervene. Ilara, this is remarkable. Let's discuss it, but we must respect your mother's wishes. The send button clicked. A digital bridge extended in defiance of the storm. Inside, conflict raged. Respect for Lena's pride warred with his growing conviction that Ilara's mind was a rare asset, one the world couldn't afford to lose. For the first time, his detachment faltered. Emotion seeped in, warm and unsettling, urging him to protect this fragile alliance. Ilara read the reply in secret, huddled under her blankets as morning light filtered through the curtains, the apartment quiet save for Lena's soft snores from the couch. Her heart raced, a mix of triumph and terror. Triumph that he'd seen value in her work. Terror that it might not be enough to mend the rift. The past nights blurred in her memory. Lamplight burning her eyes, pencils worn to nubs, equations dancing like puzzles she had to solve to keep the pieces together. Julian wasn't just a helper, he was the first to see her as more than a smart kid in a poor home. Losing that gaze felt like vanishing, her A+s reduced to echoes in an empty room. School that day dragged, the classroom's chatter a distant buzz as she sketched refinements in the margins of her notebook. By afternoon, Lena picked her up, her face drawn from a shift that had dragged on with whispers from coworkers. They walked home in silence. The sidewalk cracked under their feet, the air thick with unsaid words. Dinner was simple. Rice and beans, steam rising in curls that matched Lena's frayed nerves. Ilara, about Mr. Thorne. It's for the best. People talk, and I won't have you hurt by it. Ilara's fork paused midair, her small chest tightening. But Mom, he helps me think bigger, like real things. The words spilled out, laced with desperation she tried to mask. Lena's eyes softened, but resolve hardened her jaw, the same steel that had carried them through evictions and empty pantries. It's not safe. End of discussion. Lena rose to clear plates, the clatter masking her own ache. She glimpsed the article's venom again at work. Words like questionable motives twisting her stomach. Pride demanded she shield Ilara, even if it meant dimming her light. That night, as Lena collapsed into exhausted sleep, Ilara slipped to the table again, her project spread like a map to salvation. She refined the diagrams, adding notes on materials, recycled plastics for casings, open-source solar cells. If she could make it undeniable, perhaps Lena would relent. Fear clawed at her. Poverty she knew, its gnawing familiarity, but losing the bridge to real felt like drowning in shadows. Tears blurred the page, but she wiped them away, determination a quiet fire in her veins. Julian, across town, stared at the same schematics projected on his wall, the penthouse's vastness amplifying his solitude. The design's flaws were evident, inefficiencies in flow rates, scalability hurdles, but its core pulsed with innovation. He traced a line with his finger, memories surfacing, his first hack at 12, a simple app that organized his chaotic life, born from necessity. Ilara's work echoed that. Necessity forged into creation. The board's ultimatum loomed in his mind, Evelyn's voice a ghost. Step back or risk everything. But retreat now felt like betrayal, not just of her, but of the part of himself he'd long ignored, the boy who'd craved a mentor's validation. By morning, resolve crystallized. He'd fight the rumors head-on, legal statements, PR counters. But for Ilara, subtlety, an anonymous package of components, solar cells, tubing, sent to her school labeled Science Club donation. No note, just tools to build. As he dispatched it, a warmth spread in his chest. Not calculation, but connection. The clouds of suspicion thickened, but in their shadow, seeds of defiance took root. Julian Thorne, master of empires, was learning the chaos of care. The email's glow faded on Julian's screen, but Ilara's words lingered like an afterimage burned into his retinas. Please say it's good enough. He pushed back from the desk, the penthouse's vast emptiness amplifying the quiet tick of rain against the windows. Sleep eluded him that night, the scotch's warmth long dissipated, replaced by a restless churn. Logic, his steadfast ally, faltered here. Ilara's plea wasn't data to parse, but a raw appeal that tugged at threads he'd long severed. The boy he'd been, crafting worlds in code to fill the void of absent parents. To ignore her now felt like complicity in her diminishment. Yet Lena's boundary loomed like a firewall, unbreachable without risk. Morning broke gray and unrelenting, the city's skyline smudged by fog. Julian dressed mechanically, the silk tie a noose around his resolve. At the office, he buried himself in meetings, algorithms scrolling like distractions. But Ilara's schematic haunted the edges of his vision. By noon, Marcus delivered the anonymous package confirmation, components en route to Northwood Science Club, no trace back to him. A workaround subtle as code hidden in subroutines. Yet doubt gnawed. Was this presumption or preservation? Ilara discovered the box after school, tucked in the club's storage closet amid dusty beakers and faded posters of the periodic table. The label was generic, donation for aspiring inventors. But her heart leaped as she peeled back the cardboard, revealing solar cells glinting like captured sunlight, coils of tubing smooth under her fingers, a set of basic tools that smelled of fresh metal and possibility. No note, but she knew. Julian's hand, invisible yet felt. The classroom's fluorescent hum faded as she unpacked, her small hands trembling with a mix of exhilaration and fear. This was affirmation, a bridge rebuilt in secret. But the secrecy weighed heavily. Hiding from Lena felt like betrayal, a crack in the foundation of their bond. She lugged the box home in her backpack, the weight pulling at her shoulders like the unspoken lies accumulating. The apartment greeted her with familiar scents. Simmering beans on the stove, the faint must of damp walls. But Lena's face, lined with exhaustion from another shift, twisted Ilara's gut. "How was school, sweetie?" Lena asked, stirring the pot, steam curling up to fog the tiny kitchen window. "Fine," Ilara murmured, slipping the backpack under the table. Fine, a word that hid worlds. That night, as Lena dozed on the couch with a heating pad pressed to her back, Ilara worked in whispers. The table lamp cast long shadows, its bulb flickering like her resolve. She assembled prototypes, a crude filter casing from recycled bottles, solar panels wired with careful twists, the air thick with the sharp tang of solder from a borrowed iron. Equations flowed in her notebook, adjustments for flow rates calculated in the dim light. Each connection sparked hope, proof she could contribute, not just receive. But fear coiled tighter. What if Lena found out? What if the whispers reached school, painting her as the charity kid? Lena sensed the shift in her daughter over days, the way Ilara's eyes darted away during meals, her chatter subdued. Pride had driven her decision to cut ties, pride that had armored her through dead-end jobs, through nights counting coins for bus fare. But now it isolated her, a wall built to protect yet trapping them in stasis. At work, the whispers persisted. Colleagues' sidelong glances, a manager's awkward, "Everything okay at home?" The job Julian had arranged felt tainted now, a reminder of vulnerability exposed. She threw herself into tasks, fingers flying over keyboards, the click-clack a rhythm to drown the doubt. Yet at night, lying on the lumpy couch, the apartment's creaks echoing her unrest, she replayed the cafe confrontation. Julian's eyes had held no malice, only a mirror to her own fierce protectiveness. Was she shielding Ilara or smothering her? The breaking point came on a rain-lashed evening, the sky unleashing torrents that hammered the roof like accusations. Alara hunched over her project, the filter humming faintly as she tested it with tap water clouded by added dirt. A makeshift lab in their cramped space. The door swung open, Lena home early, soaked from the dash without an umbrella. Water pooled at her feet, the scent of wet asphalt clinging to her coat. Ilara, what's all this? Caught, Ilara froze, the filter dripping into a bowl with plinks that echoed her pounding heart. Mom, I made something. From what Mr. Thorne taught me. The words tumbled out, defenses crumbling. She explained the design. Nano-inspired mesh trapping impurities, solar power for off-grid use, costs low enough for neighborhoods like theirs. It's for places without clean water, like Aunt Maria's old block. I thought, if it's good, maybe he could help make it real. Lena's face paled, then flushed, the room's dim light casting harsh shadows on her features. She sank into a chair, the wood creaking under her weight. Where did the parts come from? Alara's voice cracked. A donation at school. But I think he sent them. The admission hung heavy, the rain's roar outside amplifying the silence between them. Lena's hands clenched, knuckles white against the table's scars. Pride surged, a mother's fury at boundaries crossed, but beneath it, fear bloomed. Fear for Ilara's innocence in a world that twisted good into gossip. Fear that her daughter's brilliance would draw predators disguised as patrons. I told you, we're done with him. This sneaking around, it's not you. But Mom, Ilara whispered, tears brimming, her small frame trembling. He's the only one who sees me. Not just smart, but like I can change things. Without him, it's all just papers again. Useless. The word useless pierced Lena like a shard, echoing her own buried despairs, nights wondering if her sacrifices amounted to anything beyond survival. She pulled Ilara into her arms, the girl's sobs muffled against her damp coat, the scent of rain mingling with the metallic tang of the prototype. Holding her, Lena felt the weight of her pride's cost. Alara's fear wasn't of poverty's bite, but of dreams deferred, of a mind starved in isolation. Julian's help had ignited something irreplaceable, a sense of worth beyond grades. To snuff it now felt like cruelty. That night, as Ilara slept fitfully, clutching her notebook like a lifeline, Lena sat by the window, rain streaking the glass like tears unshed. The apartment's confines pressed in, but her mind wandered to possibilities. Ilara's eyes alight in that lab, ideas flowing unchecked. Pride warred with love, a mother's eternal battle. By dawn, resolve formed. Not surrender, but a bridge. She'd confront Julian again, demand transparency. For Ilara's sake, she'd bend, if only to ensure the flame didn't gut her out. Julian, unaware, faced his own reckoning. The board's pressure mounted. Evelyn's email demanding a meeting, rumors swelling like a virus in the press. He stared at Ilara's schematic, projected large, its lines a testament to untamed genius. Vulnerability crept in, a foreign warmth. This wasn't just investment, it was kinship, fragile and profound. As the city stirred below, he typed a message to Lena. We need to talk. For her. The send echoed his shifting core, the logic king yielding to the pull of human connection. The boardroom at Thorne Industries loomed like a coliseum under siege, its long oak tables scarred from years of corporate battles, the air thick with the acrid scent of fresh printouts and cooling coffee. Rain lashed the floor-to-ceiling windows, blurring the cityscape into a watercolor of grays, as if the world outside mirrored the storm brewing within. Julian sat at the head, his chair a throne of isolation, fingers drumming a silent rhythm on the armrest. The board members filed in, their footsteps muffled on the carpet, faces etched with the stern resolve of guardians protecting their empire. Evelyn Hart took her seat opposite, her silver hair a crown of authority, eyes locking onto him like targeting lasers. Julian, she began, her voice slicing through the hum of the ventilation system. We've called this emergency session for one reason. Your judgment is compromised. This Entanglement with the Vance family has escalated into a liability. Rumors are spreading like wildfire. Press inquiries, internal leaks. We demand resolution. The room's chill deepened, the rain's patter a relentless underscore to her words. Printouts circulated, tabloid clippings, anonymized emails from staff expressing concern, stock tickers hinting at minor dips attributed to leadership instability. Julian's jaw tightened, the bitter taste of black coffee lingering on his tongue. He'd anticipated this ultimatum, prepared counters with data. Ilara's prototype schematics anonymized as Youth Innovation Initiative, projections of long-term ROI from nurturing talent. But as Evelyn laid out the terms, logic frayed at the edges. Sever all ties, she continued, her tone brooking no dissent. Issue a substantial anonymous donation to the city's education fund, enough to bury the story in goodwill press, or face a vote of no confidence. You'll lose control of what you built, Julian. Is one child worth that? The question hung, heavy as the storm clouds outside. Julian's mind raced, not in calculations, but in flashes. Ilara's tear-streaked email, pleading for validation. Lena's fierce gaze in the cafe, a mirror to his own buried pride. He'd always viewed people as variables, predictable, optimizable. But Ilara had disrupted that equation. Her intellect a spark that ignited something dormant in him, a hunger for connection, for legacy beyond balance sheets. To capitulate now felt like erasure, not just of her potential, but of the vulnerability she'd unearthed in him. The man behind the mogul, yearning to mend what his own childhood had lacked. He leaned forward, the chair creaking like a warning. This isn't entanglement, it's vision. Thorn Industries thrives on innovation, on spotting outliers before the market does. Ilara Vance is that outlier, a mind that could redefine fields we're only scratching. Dismissing her because of optics? That's short-sighted, Evelyn. Cowardly. Murmurs rippled, faces hardening. Evelyn's eyes narrowed, the rain shadow dancing across her features. Vision or delusion? You're risking everything for a sob story. Step back, or we'll force you out. The door swung open then, a gust of cooler air from the hall slicing through the tension. Marcus entered, his expression neutral, but eyes flicking to Julian with a subtle nod. The signal they'd arranged. Behind him, Lena and Ilara, the girl clutching a cardboard box like a shield, her small frame dwarfed by the room's grandeur. Lena's face was a mask of determination, rain-dampened hair clinging to her forehead. The scent of wet wool faint as she stepped forward. Ilara's eyes met Julian's, wide with a mix of fear and resolve, her sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. "What is this?" Evelyn demanded, rising halfway, her voice sharp as cracking ice. Julian stood, the motion deliberate, buying time for his racing thoughts. "Witnesses to the truth. Ms. Vance, Ilara, thank you for coming." Lena's gaze swept the room, pride straightening her spine despite the intimidation. The suits, the power radiating like heat from a forge. She'd agonized over Marcus's urgent call, the plea to set the record straight. Pride screamed retreat, but Ilara's prototype, assembled in secret defiance, had tipped the scale. Her daughter's tears that night had been a revelation. The fear wasn't of whispers, but of dreams extinguished. For Ilara, she'd face this arena. Ilara set the box on the table with a soft thud, her hands steady despite the tremor in her knees. The board watched, murmurs rising like static. She unpacked the prototype, a compact device of tubing and panels, solar cells glinting under the lights, a beaker of murky water beside it. "This is what I made," she said, her voice small but clear, cutting through the room's hum. "A water filter. For poor places, it uses nanomesh to catch bad stuff and solar to power it. No plugs needed. Costs less than a toy." She demonstrated, pouring the dirty water through, the faint whir of a tiny pump activated by a switch. Clear droplets emerged into another beaker, the transformation mesmerizing in its simplicity. "See? It works. I calculated the flow, 5 liters per hour, efficiency 92%, and it's from what Mr. Thorne showed me. Ideas turned real." The room fell silent, the rain's drum a backdrop to the drip-drip of purified water. Evelyn leaned in, skepticism warring with intrigue, the scent of electronics from the device mingling with the board's colognes. Julian's chest tightened, not with triumph, but awe. This child facing titans, her creation a testament to resilience he'd only glimpsed in himself. Lena spoke next, her voice steady, laced with the steel of survival. My daughter built this alone, because of what Julian taught her. Not charity, knowledge. But the rumors, they hurt, made me pull away. I won't let her light dim because of them. Evelyn scoffed, but her eyes lingered on the filter. Impressive parlor trick, but this doesn't change the risks. Julian stepped forward, the projection screen behind him flickering to life with Alara's schematics, enlarged, annotated with his own refinements. It changes everything. This isn't a trick, it's proof. Thorn was built on betting on the unconventional. Alara represents that. Talent overlooked by circumstance. I reject your ultimatum. The words hung, defiance electric in the air. Inside, Julian felt the shift complete. No longer a detached observer, but an advocate, the vulnerability he'd feared now his strength. I'll fund it personally, the Vance Thorn Fund, for kids like her, scouting, mentoring, turning potential into prototypes. No company resources diverted. But if you force me out, you lose the vision that built this place. Murmurs erupted, faces fracturing, some nodding, others scowling. Evelyn's gaze softened fractionally, the prototype's hum a persistent reminder. You're gambling your legacy. No, Julian said, his voice low but resonant, eyes on Alara's hopeful face. I'm securing it. The vote came swiftly, tension coiling like a spring. A narrow hold, no ouster, for now. As the board dispersed, grumbling but acquiescent, Julian approached Lena and Alara. The rain eased outside, sunlight piercing the clouds like a promise. Thank you, he murmured, the words heavy with unspoken relief. Lena nodded, her hand on Alara's shoulder. For her, but no more secrets. Alara beamed, the filter gleaming on the table. Julian felt the warmth spread, a choice made, not in boardrooms, but in the quiet revolution of opened hearts. The storm had passed, but its echoes lingered, reshaping him into something more than code and capital, a man connected finally to the human equation. The sun dipped low over the city park, casting elongated shadows across the winding path where joggers pounded the gravel in rhythmic thuds, their breaths puffing like steam in the crisp autumn air. Leaves crunched underfoot, a symphony of rustles in shades of amber and crimson, releasing an earthy scent that mingled with the distant aroma of roasted chestnuts from a vendor's cart. Julian Thorn walked beside Alara, his strides measured to match her shorter ones. The year's passage etched subtly in his features, a faint softening around the eyes, a posture less rigid, as if the weight of constant calculation had lifted, if only by degrees. It had been 12 months since that stormy boardroom confrontation, a year that unfolded like an algorithm optimizing in real time. The Vance Thorn Fund had blossomed from blueprint to beacon, its offices a modest hub in the city's revitalized district, walls lined with prototypes and whiteboards scrawled in eager hands. Julian had poured his personal fortune into it, not as a grand gesture, but as a deliberate pivot, redirecting his empire's fringe toward untapped minds. Dozens of children now thrived under its umbrella, scholarships bridging gaps, mentors like shadows of his younger self, guiding projects from scribbles to startups. The air in those rooms buzzed with possibility, the faint whir of 3D printers and the sharp tang of solder, a constant backdrop to breakthroughs. Alara had transformed most vividly. No longer the reticent girl clutching certificates in solitude, she moved through the fund's labs with the confidence of a navigator charting stars. At 9 now, her birthday marked with a quiet gathering where Julian had gifted her a custom toolkit, its leather case embossed with her initials. She dove into advanced programs, her days a blend of specialized classes and hands-on invention. The water filter prototype, refined through iterations under Julian's subtle guidance, had evolved into a pilot program, Units deployed in underserved neighborhoods. Their solar hum a quiet revolution against scarcity. She spoke of it with a maturity that belied her age, her voice steady as she presented to small groups, the click of slides echoing her growing poise. Yet it was the inner shifts that Julian felt most profoundly, a quiet metamorphosis in the recesses of his once fortified mind. He'd always navigated life as a series of transactions, emotions quantified and minimized. But Alara's persistence, her tears turned to tenacity, had unraveled that. In mentoring her, he'd confronted his own echoes. The boy coding alone in a silent house, craving validation beyond metrics. Now, as they strolled, the park's breeze ruffling his hair, he glimpsed fulfillment not in boardroom conquests, but in her animated gestures, her questions that challenged even him. Vulnerability, once a flaw in his code, had become a feature, humanity's upgrade. Lena walked a few paces behind, her presence a steady anchor. The year had reshaped her too. No longer bowed by endless shifts, she managed projects at the fund with a quiet authority. Her back pain a faded memory thanks to treatments she'd once deemed unattainable. Pride, her lifelong shield, now channeled into advocacy, coordinating families like hers, ensuring support felt earned, not bestowed. She'd forgiven the secrecy, their bond mended in shared purpose. Though she watched Julian with a mother's vigilant eye, the park's fading light casting long shadows that reminded her of past storms. Dad, wait, I mean Julian, Ilara corrected herself with a giggle, the slip warming something in his chest. She hadn't called him that before, but the fund's informal circles had blurred lines, families forming in the forge of collaboration. Look at this. She pulled a tablet from her backpack, its screen glowing with a new schematic, an enhanced filter variant integrated with AI for predictive maintenance. I added sensors to detect contamination levels. It could alert communities before problems spike. What do you think? Julian knelt to her level, the gravel biting into his knee through his slacks, the earthy scent of soil rising as he studied the design. Her eyes, bright and unyielding, mirrored his own analytical gaze, but infused with a warmth he'd never possessed. Brilliant, he said, voice low with genuine awe. The predictive algo you've optimized for low-power chips. That's not just functional, it's scalable. Lives changed, Alara, because of you. She beamed, the tablet's light reflecting in her eyes like captured stars. Because of us. You showed me how. Lena caught up, her footsteps soft on the path, a fond smile tugging her lips. She's been up late tweaking that. Reminds me of someone. Her gaze met Julian's, a silent acknowledgement, their alliance forged in fire, now tempered into trust. As they continued, the park's fountain burbled ahead, water arcing in graceful sprays that caught the sunset's golden hues. Alara skipped forward, her laughter mingling with the splash, but paused to glance back. Julian, you turned my papers into this. All of it. What's your reward? He stopped, the question piercing like an unhandled query in his core. Reward. He'd amassed fortunes, but this, the quiet joy in her growth, the fund's ripple of change, transcended ledgers. It was redemption. For the isolated boy he'd been, for the man who'd equated worth with wealth. Emotion welled, unbidden and profound, a warmth spreading through him like code compiling flawlessly. My reward, he said, voice thick, kneeling again to meet her eyes, is you, Alara. Watching an extraordinary idea, like you, become reality, seeing the world shift one spark at a time. She hugged him then, impulsive and fierce, her small arms around his neck, the scent of her shampoo, simple, citrusy, enveloping him. Julian held her, the embrace awkward at first, then natural, a circuit completing. Lena watched, tears glistening unspoken, the fountain's mist cooling her cheeks. This was family, not blood, but forged in shared intellect and unyielding belief. As they walked on, the sun sinking into a blaze of orange, Julian felt the transformation settle deep. No longer the detached architect, but a participant in life's messy algorithm. Ilara chattered about future projects, her hand in his, the park's leaves swirling in the breeze like promises of more to come. The A-plus paradox, effort unseen, unrewarded, had dissolved, replaced by a truth he'd learned through her. True value lay not in grades or gold, but in the connections that turned potential into profound change. In the gathering dusk, their shadows merged on the path, a testament to bonds unbreakable, futures intertwined. As we conclude the tale of Ilara and Julian in the A-plus paradox, we witness how a single spark of curiosity can ignite profound change, bridging worlds divided by circumstance and awakening the humanity within us all. Ilara's journey from invisible excellence to innovative triumph reminds us that true value lies not in accolades, but in the courage to transform ideas into reality. Through Julian's evolution, we see that even the most guarded hearts can find redemption in mentorship and connection. Thank you, dear listeners, for joining us on this emotional voyage and for your attentive ears. Your support means the world. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories. Hit that like button if this resonated with you and share your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, keep chasing those sparks. Goodbye.